Welcome to our book review. The book that we're going to review is The Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Wuthering Heights is not a romance novel. People tend to think of Wuthering Heights as a romance. It was even voted the greatest love story of all time, but the book is closer to a gothic novel than a romantic. But before going to the book, let's get to know the author, Emily Bronte.
The author Emily Jane Bronte was born in 1818 in England. She is the daughter of the curate of Haworth in West Yorkshire. Emily was the third eldest child of her father. She was an English novelist and poet who was the best known for her English novel Wuthering Heights. At the age of 17, Emily began her education at Roe Head Girls' School but later left the school due to sickness. Her sudden development of sickness resulting from tuberculosis that cost her life in 1848. Do you know that Emily died thinking the book was a failure? Wuthering Heights publishers consistently rejected the novel, that Emily Bronte paid the substantial sum of £50 to have it published. It met with no popular or critical acclaim and she died believing it had failed. Now Emily's only novel, Wuthering Heights, remains one of the enduring and admired English novels of all time. The dark, wind-swept romance of troubled orphan Heathcliff and Catherine Earnshaw, haunted story of a doomed love.
The novel starts on the late winter in 1801 when a man named Lockwood rented a manor house called Thrushcross Grange in a remote area in the county of England. Lockwood, being curious in the story of his landlord Heathcliff and the strange inhabitants of Wuthering Heights, he asked his housekeeper Mrs. Nellie Dean to tell him the history of Heathcliff since she was a servant of the owner of the manor at that time. Lockwood started to write down all the recollection of her tale as soon as she began to unfold the history of Wuthering Heights. Mrs. Dean begins the story at the time when the young orphan Heathcliff was adopted by Mr. Earnshaw. He was brought to Wuthering Heights to raise him with his own children, Hindley and Catherine. Heathcliff, being new in the family, he was despised at first by his foster siblings, especially Hindley. However, Catherine grew to love him as they got older, while Hindley grew even more hatred to Heathcliff, for their father, Mr. Earnshaw, has prepared and favored Heathcliff instead of him. The situation led Mr. Earnshaw to send Hindley away to college. After the death of Mr. Earnshaw, Hindley came back bringing his wife Frances with him, and Heathcliff's status in the house as the favored one has immediately vanished. Hindley made him a servant and treated him cruelly, but his younger sister, Catherine, continued to love Heathcliff. However, her love for Heathcliff has started to plummet as they turned to young adults. When they met, the brother and sister Edgar and Isabella Linton, who live nearby and happens to live in a higher social class. For this reason, Catherine felt instant admiration for Edgar Linton, but not by the basis of love, but for her desire for money, power, and respect. Despite of his overwhelming love to Heathcliff, her infatuation with Edgar has led her to be engaged and marries him. Hindley's wife Frances died due to the sickness, leaving him their baby boy Hareton. During that time, Heathcliff decided to run away and left for 3 years to rebuild himself. When he came back, he vowed to seek revenge for all those who had wronged him. Heathcliff inherits the manor after Hindley's death and married Isabel Linton, the sister of Edgar, with the intention to inherit Thrushcross Grange. Catherine became ill and gave birth to a child named after her, Catherine Linton. Upon her death, Heathcliff felt devastated, for Catherine was his love of his life. He begged her spirit to stay on the earth, and no matter what form it will be, just to feel her presence again.
After that, Isabella flew to London and gave birth to Heathcliff's son, named Linton, after her family. 13 years later, Cathy, the daughter of Catherine, which was also named after her, was raised by Nellie Dean at the Grange. Despite of all the history that happened at the manor, Cathy didn't have any idea or knowledge about it. One day, while wandering, she happens to discover the manor and met Hareton and played together. 3 years have passed. Cathy met Heathcliff at the upland and makes a visit to the Wuthering Heights to meet Linton. They began to have a secret love affair, but through letters only. However, the intentions of Linton to pursue Cathy was not for love, but because Heathcliff was forcing him to do it in order to finally have a legal claim to Transcrone's Grange and finally complete his revenge to Edgar Linton. One day, Edgar Linton became ill and weak on his deathbed. Heathcliff planned to lure Lally and Cathy to go back at Wuthering Heights, only to imprison them and force Cathy to marry Linton. Not long after they got married, Edgar died, also followed by the death of sickly Linton. Heathcliff has achieved a full control to Transcrone's Grange and Wuthering Heights. He forces Catherine to go back at Wuthering Heights and made her as a servant, and rents Transcrone's Grange to Mr. Lockwood. Nelly's story ended as she reaches the present. Lockwood was greatly dismayed and ends his tenancy at Transcrone's Grange and returns to London, but he returns 6 months after to visit Nelly and learn some developments in the story. Although Catherine hated Mac Hareton before, she grows to love him as they live together at Wuthering Heights. Heathcliff becomes more and more obsessed with the memory of the elder Catherine, to the extent that he begins speaking to her ghost. Heathcliff died walking in the night at the upland while remembering the elder Catherine. After his death, Cathy and Hareton inherited Wuthering Heights and Transcrone's Grange and planned to get married on the next New Year's Day. Lockwood visited the graves of Catherine and Heathcliff after hearing the end of the story. And that will be all for the summary of Wuthering Heights. As a Gothic novel. Gothic novel usually features supernatural elements, ominous setting. In Wuthering Heights, there are scenes of passion, cruelty, supernatural elements, and a dark, forbidding atmosphere. Heathcliff is the most significant character in Emily's Bronte-only novel, Wuthering Heights. He describes the novel, which is the story of his love, frustration, hatred, revenge, passion, and his reconciliation with life. In a word, Heathcliff is the soul of the novel. He not only acts and suffers, but he causes others to act and suffer as well. Heathcliff's great natural abilities, strength of character, and love for Catherine Earnshaw all enable him to raise himself from humble beginnings to the status of a wealthy gentleman, but his need to revenge himself for Hindley's abuse and Catherine's betrayals lead him into a twisted life of a cruelty and hatred. Here's a thing that symbolizes something on the novel, and that is the ghost. Ghosts are spirits used to represent souls, memory, and the past in Wuthering Heights. Cathy's ghost disturbed Heathcliff based on the stored memory of the shared past. The love of Cathy turns into an obsession for revenge. Heathcliff and Cathy curse and fought each other, giving each other no peace. They rejected heaven and God. The two were angry with each other and proclaimed no peace in life or death. This explains why their spirits and souls were wandering, hunting, or getting hunted.
Not every romantic novel is about true love. Books such as Wuthering Heights and Rebecca are far from being romantic. From romance comedies to gothic romance, the novels have plots that are quite different from their normal storyline. Rebecca is a gothic suspense novel by Daphne du Maurier, published in 1938. Widely considered a classic, it is a psychological thriller about a young woman who becomes obsessed with her husband's first wife. These novels are more mysterious and full of suspense. Clearly, authors Daphne du Maurier and Emily Bronte wanted a romantic plot that was unusual and unexpected from readers. Luckily, many people who read either Rebecca or Wuthering Heights were quite surprised with where the authors took the storyline. Both Daphne du Maurier in Rebecca and Emily Bronte in Wuthering Heights display similar personalities in characters, themes of revenge, social class, and identity. However, the novels differ in writing styles and symbolism. As we go on to the characters of Wuthering Heights and Rebecca, they show us similarities. For example, Maxim and Heathcliff were stuck in the memories of their first love, while Catherine and the narrator of Rebecca are quite similar in circumstances but different in personalities. Both of these girls were loyal to Maxim and Heathcliff. Now, here's a thing, do you know Twilight? We are actually a fan of this saga. Actually, Wuthering Heights is mentioned in the series as one of Bella's favorite books. That's why it's kind of familiar to us.
These are the prediction that we have. First is that Heathcliff will have a revenge. Second, we thought that Catherine and Harrington will be a couple. And lastly, the thought that the ending will be indeed a tragedy.
The obsession of Heathcliff for revenge to those who have wronged him did nothing good for him except tragedies. However, the ending of Wuthering Heights offered a glimpse of hope for the future since the remaining characters and Cathy and Harrington are engaged and plan to marry and move to the Grange. After the death of Heathcliff, they inherited the Wuthering Heights and Transcon's Grange. We think that both of them are the symbol of the new beginning to the past life of Wuthering Heights and Transcon's Grange, the tragedies, the wrong-headed decisions, the remorseless, the cruelties, and the cowardice, the judgmental rejections are reversed and subsumed in the renewal of heart, mind, and souls of a young Catherine and Harrington.
Walk away.